"You don't belong in seat 2A. That ticket must have been stolen." No greeting, no smile, just an accusation, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. A black man in a hoodie and sneakers, seated in first class, suddenly treated like a criminal. Eyes turned, whispers started, and the quiet weight of judgment filled the air like turbulence. But what that flight crew didn't know was that in exactly 6 minutes, everything would flip upside down. Because when the truth came out, it wasn't just a seat that would be reclaimed, it was the entire system that would start to fall. If you've ever been judged by how you look or know someone who has, drop a comment saying "I belong," hit that like button, and subscribe to this channel for more powerful true stories that the world needs to hear. Now fasten your seatbelt. This story is ready for takeoff. Newark Liberty International Airport, Gate C-112. It was one of those busy Thursday afternoons. Flight delays, hurried announcements, the rhythmic drag of suitcase wheels, and travelers desperately clutching overpriced coffees. Among the sea of tired executives, tourists, and airport staff, a man stood out. Not because he tried to, but because people weren't used to seeing someone like him in a place like that. He wore a clean grey Nike hoodie, dark jeans, fresh white sneakers. No briefcase, no flashy watch, no assistant at his side. Just a leather passport holder, a boarding pass marked Seat 2A, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was. Darius Walker didn't care for showmanship. He wasn't here to impress. He had meetings in Zurich, a keynote in Berlin, and a silent promise to himself never to fly coach again, not after what it took to get here. But this flight would be different. And not because of the destination. As he scanned his pass and entered the jet bridge, he nodded politely to the gate agent who barely looked up. A few feet behind him, 2 white passengers in business suits glanced at each other. One smirked. The first-class cabin was crisp and quiet. White leather seats, chrome accents, subtle scent of citrus cleaner. Darius placed his carry-on in the overhead bin and settled into 2A. He pulled out his tablet, loaded a report, and began reviewing numbers. That's when she appeared. The flight attendant, mid-40s, pale skin, dark red lipstick, hair tied in a tight bun like it might crack if she smiled. Her name tag read, Heather. She approached without hesitation. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone already hard. "This seat is reserved for first-class passengers only." Darius looked up calmly. He held out his boarding pass. "I'm in 2A. She didn't even glance at it. "I think there's been a mistake," she continued, eyes scanning him like a threat. "I'll need to see your ID and your ticket again." Darius blinked once. No anger, no fear, just disbelief. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it would be the last time it happened here. Passengers across the aisle started to pay attention. One man leaned forward, trying to hear. A woman in seat 2C shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but saying nothing. "I already scanned my ticket," Darius replied, his voice low and steady. "Is there a problem I should be aware of?" Heather folded her arms. "You're not dressed like someone who flies in this cabin." That was it. The phrase. The moment. Not a question. A judgment. 6 minutes. That's all it would take. Darius leaned back in his seat, looked Heather in the eye, and said 4 words. "You're making a mistake." But she had no idea just how big it was. Heather didn't flinch. If anything, Darius's calm tone irritated her more. "You need to step out of this seat and let us sort this out," she said, louder this time. Loud enough for other passengers to turn their heads, which was exactly what she wanted. Embarrassment is a weapon when you think you're in control. Darius didn't move. He simply held up his boarding pass again, this time letting it hover in the air between them. "I scanned this at the gate. My name is Darius Walker. This is seat 2A. Heather finally snatched the pass from his hand, studied it, frowned, then forced a brittle smile. Looks like, well, maybe it's a system glitch." She didn't mean it. She wasn't confused. She was just stalling, trying to figure out how to explain her own bias in real time. Then came the final blow. She stepped aside and motioned to someone at the back of the cabin. A man in a pilot's uniform emerged, Not the captain flying the plane, but the senior flight supervisor. Tall, older, graying hair. Nameplate read W. Hargrove. He approached slowly, with the kind of exaggerated calm that made everything worse. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked Heather, ignoring Darius entirely. "This passenger refuses to move from a seat that doesn't belong to him," she said. "Even though we've explained he must be in economy or possibly on the wrong flight." Darius laughed once under his breath, the kind of laugh that carries years behind it. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said, finally locking eyes with Hargrove. That's when Hargrove finally looked down at the boarding pass Heather handed him. He studied it, then blinked. "Seat 2A, Darius Walker, confirmed." He froze for half a second, then cleared his throat. "Well, Mr. Walker, we'll double-check the manifest just to be safe. No apology, no acknowledgement, just deflection." Darius leaned slightly forward. "You already know I'm on that list," he said. A few murmurs rippled through the cabin. From across the aisle, a white businessman in a navy suit finally spoke up. "I saw him board before me. That's his seat." Heather shot him a warning look, as if to say, "Stay out of it." But it was too late. The narrative was slipping. Another passenger turned around from row 3. "Is this really about the seat or the man sitting in it?" Now, Heather looked flushed, cornered. She turned to Darius again, but her voice had lost its power. "We're just following protocol, sir." "No," Darius replied, standing up slowly. "You're following assumptions, and you've just made the biggest one of your career." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a slim, matte black badge holder. Inside it bore a gold-embossed seal, Chairman Executive Oversight, Sterling Aviation Holdings, the parent company of the entire airline. Heather's lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no words came out. Captain Hargrove looked pale. Passengers gasped. One woman literally covered her mouth. A man muttered, "Holy shh," before catching himself. Darius tucked the badge away. "6 minutes ago I tried to give you grace," he said, calmly. "You chose something else." Then he reached for his phone, opened a secure app and said quietly into the microphone, "Activate override protocol. Flight 227, log incident, begin crew review, immediate." Heather blinked. Hargrove stumbled back a step. A soft ping sounded on their earpieces. System override, chain of command bypassed. Everyone knew what that meant. Darius sat back down, and this time nobody questioned whether he belonged there. The cabin door was still open, the engines still silent, but inside the crew's private channel, alarms were already ringing. Heather stood motionless, her posture stiff like glass under pressure. Captain Hargrove stepped aside and pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. "Confirming override on Flight 227. Passenger Authority Code, Sterling Group Executive Oversight." A voice replied instantly on the other end. "Confirmed. Authority supersedes Captain Command. Incident flagged. Internal compliance en route." He lowered his hand slowly, his face drained of color. This wasn't just an embarrassing mistake. It was a corporate breach, initiated by the very man he'd dismissed 30 seconds earlier. Heather turned to him in a whisper-sharp voice. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Darius remained calm, unfazed. "I wanted to see how far you'd take it." In the back galley, a second attendant named Evan watched from the curtain, pale and nervous. He'd seen everything. He'd even hesitated before stepping in, but he didn't, and now he was wondering if that silence had cost him his job. "I told you he had the right seat," he whispered to another junior steward beside him. "No, you didn't," she replied. "You said it looked like a misunderstanding. That's not what I—" He stopped. It didn't matter. Not now. Meanwhile, in the front of the cabin, first-class passengers began murmuring louder. Some recorded the moment quietly on their phones. Others whispered to their seatmates, "What's going to happen to her? Did he just fire the crew? Is he really the CEO of the whole airline?" No one knew for sure, but everyone felt it. The power dynamic had flipped. Heather stumbled backward into the galley and slammed the curtain closed. She gripped the silver edge of the sink and stared at her own reflection in the mirror above. Her cheeks flushed red. Her hands trembled. "This can't be happening," she muttered. Hargrove followed her in. "We need to manage this. He's not even dressed like a CEO," she snapped. Silence. And that was it. The phrase, again, the root of the problem, laid bare. Not protocol, not procedure. Perception. "You really think a title comes with a uniform?" Hargrove asked, almost gently. "He owns your uniform." Back in the cabin, Darius was already typing. He wasn't documenting the incident. He was reviewing the performance reports of every crew member on the flight. In his internal system, he could see prior complaints tied to Heather's ID. This wasn't her first incident. It was her fifth, 3 for inappropriate conduct, 1 for racial bias, 1 still under investigation. He tapped once on the screen, flagged for termination. The stewardess seated behind him jumped when the call light on her panel lit up. It was Darius. She approached slowly. "Yes, sir? I need a glass of water," he said, "and tell the captain to prepare for departure. I won't delay the other passengers." She nodded quickly, grateful for the tone. Calm, measured, not vindictive. As she rushed off, another voice spoke from 2C. The woman seated next to Darius leaned in. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For not yelling, for not turning this into a scene." Darius looked ahead. "I didn't have to raise my voice. They made the scene themselves. I just turned on the lights." The cabin doors sealed shut, and the jet began to push back from the gate. Altitude, 14,000 feet. Time, since takeoff, 11 minutes. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane reached cruising altitude. A soft chime echoed through first class. Beverage service would begin shortly. But no one moved. The silence was thick, not uncomfortable, just charged. Heather had been reassigned to the lower galley, well away from first class. She would not return to the cabin again. Captain Hargrove had made that decision the moment they hit 10,000 feet. Darius sat back in seat 2A, tablet in hand, noise-cancelling earbuds resting on his lap, unused. He wasn't reading. He wasn't working. He was thinking. Across from him, passengers pretended to watch their screens, but their eyes drifted, some with curiosity, others with guilt. They knew they had watched something wrong happen. Some had done nothing. A few had joined in silently with their expressions, but no one had stepped in until it was too late. Now, the man they misjudged sat just a few feet away, in control of all of it. The flight attendant, who had replaced Heather, approached Darius cautiously. She offered a bottle of water, chilled. "Would you prefer still or sparkling, sir?" Darius looked up. "Still is fine, thank you." He took the bottle, nodded and returned to his thoughts. She hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. "I just want to say I'm sorry for what happened earlier. I wasn't involved, but I saw it." Darius didn't smile, but his tone was soft. "You were quiet. That's not nothing. But next time, don't be." She nodded, eyes wide. "I won't." And then she stepped away, her movements lighter. Darius turned back to his screen. He opened a confidential portal, Sterling Aviation's internal compliance dashboard. He tapped into live crew files. Heather's was now marked under termination review. Hargrove's status, pending executive review. But Darius didn't select their names. Not yet. Instead, he opened a new memo. Subject, Flight 227 Crew Protocol Breach. Leadership Follow-up to Executive Director of Flight Operations. CC, Diversity and Equity Council. Summary, today's incident demonstrates a systemic failure in frontline bias training. Immediate action required. Mandate full DEI retraining for all supervisory flight personnel. Implement anonymous passenger incident feedback on all flights. Review hiring pipeline for first-class cabin assignments. He paused, then added one final line. First-class treatment must begin long before the seat reclines. He hit send. At the same time, in corporate HQ 2 time zones away, the message pinged directly on the CEO's phone. He saw who sent it. He didn't question it. He forwarded it to the full board with one comment. He handled it. Back on the plane, a man in seat 3D leaned forward toward Darius. "Mr. Walker, I run the hospitality program for Hilton International. If you're ever interested—" Darius raised a hand gently. "Not now." The man stopped. Darius wasn't interested in praise. He wasn't looking for a spotlight. He was restoring balance, and balance wasn't loud. It was deliberate. He finally closed the tablet and looked out the window. Clouds stretched in all directions like frozen waves. The sky was deep and clear. No turbulence, not anymore. For the first time on this flight, the man who had been treated like he didn't belong finally felt peace. Flight 227 touched down at Logan International Airport just after 8:40 p.m. The landing was smooth, uneventful, but for the crew it might as well have been the edge of a cliff. Captain Hargrove remained locked in the cockpit. Heather never returned to the cabin, and the replacement attendants walked on eggshells. As the wheels kissed the runway, the soft chime for arrival sounded. The usual robotic voice thanked passengers for flying, but there was no warmth, no smiles. Everyone in first class was quiet, not because they were tired, but because they knew they had witnessed something much bigger than a flight. Darius unfastened his belt. He didn't rush. He stood, stretched slightly, and reached for his carry-on. Calm, composed. As he pulled it from the overhead bin, the woman from 2C beside him spoke again. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle something like that with so much—" She paused, searching for the word. "Control." Darius offered a small nod. "Anger makes noise. Power makes change." She smiled. "I'll remember that." The doors opened. A young gate agent stepped on board, clearly nervous. He approached Darius with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Walker, the car is ready outside. We also moved your hotel reservation to the penthouse suite. No check-in needed." Darius blinked once. "I didn't request that." The agent stammered. Right. It's from corporate. They said to extend every courtesy." Darius placed a hand gently on the young man's shoulder. "Tell corporate I don't want courtesy. I want consistency." The agent nodded, trying to process the weight of the words. As Darius stepped off the plane, he passed the front galley. Heather stood behind the curtain just out of view, but he knew she was there. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done. By her. The correction had already been made. By him. Inside the terminal, a black mother holding her teenage son stood near the arrival gate. She looked up as Darius passed and said softly, "Thank you." He paused. "For what?" "For showing him how it's done." Her son looked up at Darius, eyes wide. "Are you a celebrity or something?" the boy asked. Darius smiled. "No, just someone who knows his worth." Outside, the night air was crisp. The car waiting for him was sleek, black, discreet, not flashy, just efficient. As he stepped in, his assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Incident report filed. HR confirms full review in progress. Social team suggests we stay quiet. Let the internal process speak." Darius thought for a moment. "Good. But make sure we follow up with every passenger on that flight. They need to know what happened wasn't just handled, it was corrected." "Yes, sir." The car pulled away, merging into city traffic. Back at the airport, 2 airline staff members updated a whiteboard schedule for crew assignments. Next to Heather's name, a red slash. Next to Hargrove's, pending. But next to a new policy just filed into the system, someone had handwritten a label in blue ink, DW Protocol. No one explained what it meant. No one had to. By the time Darius reached his hotel, the stars were barely visible above the skyline. He looked up once, not for a sign, but for space. Because people like him didn't need validation, they needed room to rise. Monday, 8:17 a.m., Sterling Aviation Headquarters, Executive Wing, Floor 41. No press release had been issued, no statement posted, and yet the company had never felt so exposed. HR was flooded, not with external complaints, but internal requests. Staff from across departments were calling, emailing, leaving messages. "Is the DW protocol official yet? Will DEI training become mandatory now?" Are we finally addressing field-level prejudice? It was as if someone had lifted a lid. The culture had long been simmering. Now it was boiling. On the 42nd floor, the CEO of Sterling Aviation stared at the message Darius had sent mid-flight. He'd read it 7 times. First-class treatment must begin long before the seat reclines. He leaned back in his chair. "It's not just a memo," he muttered. "It's a manifesto." By noon, the Internal Compliance Board had already moved. Heather's termination was finalized. Hargrove was placed on administrative leave, pending a comprehensive review. But the real change didn't come from firings. It came from alignment. In quiet meetings across regional hubs, executives began reworking training policies. In HR, the onboarding protocols were revised to include behavioral bias recognition. And across dozens of airport lounges, subtle posters began to appear. Respect has no uniform. Dignity doesn't need a dress code. Meanwhile, in the digital world, something else was happening. A passenger from Flight 227 had posted a vague tweet. "Saw something wild on a flight last week. A black man was questioned for being in first class. Turns out he runs the airline." You can guess how that ended. No names, no photos, just words. But by the next morning, it had over 7 million hashtags views. Began to spread. Seat 2A DW Protocol. First class justice. You belong here. Podcasts debated it. News anchors speculated. Yet Darius remained silent. No statement, no interview, no tweet. He didn't need the noise, because the silence was louder than any headline. At a high-level roundtable on corporate equity, one executive made an offhand comment. "Honestly, our DEI policy is just reactive. We're not like Sterling. They've got the DW thing now." People nodded, even though none of them truly knew what the DW thing entailed. But the phrase stuck. It began to mean something. It meant consequences. It meant clarity. It meant someone was finally watching. That afternoon, a young black intern at Sterling's Dallas office logged into the company portal and noticed the change in onboarding materials. One line stood out. "Discrimination is not a misstep. It's a decision. And decisions have consequences." She leaned back in her chair. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider walking through the front door. She felt seen, not because someone said she mattered, but because someone like her made it clear. He wasn't asking anymore. Tuesday, 10:34 p.m., Upper West Side, Manhattan. A quiet apartment overlooking Riverside Park. Darius stood barefoot in his living room, lights dimmed, jazz humming softly from the vintage speaker in the corner. He held a glass of still water in one hand. No wine, no scotch, just water. On the table beside him, a closed laptop, a thick black notebook, and a passport with a Sterling Aviation Platinum tag. He hadn't opened a single email all day. It had been almost 72 hours since Flight 227, and not once had he spoken publicly about it. He didn't need to. The world was speaking for him now, but the noise outside didn't touch the quiet inside. He sat down slowly on the leather couch and picked up the notebook. Its pages were filled with notes, some scribbled in airports, others in boardrooms, dates, observations, names, moments, and a section near the back. Airports I was stopped in for existing: Houston, Atlanta, Minneapolis, JFK. No accusations, no arrests, just suspicion, always suspicion. The last entry had been over 2 years ago, until Newark, until last week. He drew a line under it, then added 2 words: handled it. Not with anger, not with threats, but with power that didn't need to shout. He closed the notebook and leaned back. His phone vibrated once on the table, a message from someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Dad would have been proud of how you handled that flight." He stared at the screen. His father had worked baggage claim at LaGuardia for 34 years, had never stepped foot in first class, never even flown international. But he always told Darius, "Make it to the front of the plane, son. Not so they see your face, but so they feel your absence when you're gone." Darius smiled, the kind of smile that came with memory and weight. He rose and walked toward the window. Outside, the city lights blinked like stars trying to compete with Manhattan's pulse. Behind him, the news played faintly on TV. No official statement from Sterling Aviation, but insiders say internal reforms are moving at unprecedented speed. He turned off the screen. He wasn't interested in being a story. He was interested in building systems that made sure this story didn't have to repeat. He picked up the passport again and flipped it open. Next flight, Geneva, then Nairobi, then Sydney. He would sit in 2A each time, not out of pride, but out of principle. He belonged there, and the next person who doubted it might be out of a job before the wheels left the ground. He turned off the lamp. Silence wrapped the room like a blanket. And somewhere between memory and mission, Darius exhaled deeply, not from exhaustion, from peace. Friday, Newark Liberty International Airport, gate C-112, same gate, different day. A teenage boy, no older than 17, stood in line clutching a printed boarding pass. He wore a hand-me-down blazer, a backpack patched with flags from different countries, and shoes just a little too big. He was flying first class, his first time on a plane. He kept checking the seat number nervously. 2A. As boarding began, he looked around, searching for someone, anyone who looked like him. He didn't see it. He almost turned around. That's when a voice behind him said, "First time flying?" He turned. A man, sharply dressed in a tailored grey suit, stood smiling. Not flashy, not loud, just composed. Yeah, the boy said. "How did you know?" The man gestured to the nervous fidgeting, the tight grip on the pass. "I remember the look," he said. Is it okay for me to sit up there?" the boy asked. "Like actually up front?" The man's eyes didn't waver. "It's not just okay," he said. "It's overdue." The boy blinked. His shoulders relaxed, just slightly. "Thanks," he said quietly. The man nodded, then stepped into a different lane, headed for a different gate. But before he left, the boy caught a glimpse of something, a slim, matte black badge holder in the man's hand, just for a moment, and then he was gone. The boy boarded. He found his seat, 2A. The flight attendant, a young black woman with a calm demeanor, offered him a warm smile. "Welcome aboard," she said. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" He shook his head, then paused. "Actually, yeah. Could I get some water?" "Still or sparkling?" she asked. He smiled. "Still, please." She nodded and walked away. He looked around the cabin. No stairs, no judgment, just space. He sat back, took a deep breath and looked out the window. Outside, the sun was setting, casting golden streaks across the tarmac. The cabin door closed. A new journey began. And somewhere, in an office not far from the runway, a quiet file labeled DW Protocol kept growing, not with punishments, but with promises, because the real legacy of Seat 2A wasn't that Darius Walker claimed it. It was that he made sure no one else had to.